My name is Hunter Briggs. I'm 28 years old, and a year ago, I stood outside the gates of the Langford estate soaked in rain, shoes covered in mud, heart pounding like it was trying to punch through my ribs, wondering if I should just turn around and disappear. But let me back up. Because if you think this is a love story, you're wrong. This is a war story. A story about class, dignity, and what happens when the American dream slams face first into a wall of silver spoon judgment. And how I, just a guy from Iowa with no fancy last name, broke through that wall. Before we get into it, do me a favor. If you've ever felt overlooked, underappreciated, or called something you're not just because of where you came from, hit that like button. Leave a comment. I want to hear your story too. And don't forget to subscribe. You'll want to stay for the ending. I live in Asheville, North Carolina now. Beautiful place, mountains, farmers markets, hipster cafes. But don't let the cozy exterior fool you. This city hides its wealth behind smiles and art galleries, like a wolf in a cashmere coat. I moved here 2 years ago when I landed a job at Langford International, one of the biggest luxury smart furniture companies in the world. Yeah, smart furniture. Recliners that know your posture better than you do. Mirrors that track your skincare routine. Stuff rich people buy because they don't have to think twice. I was hired into the strategy department. No connections, no nepotism. Just 3 brutal interview rounds. A 30-slide pitch deck I designed from scratch, and a whole lot of Red Bull-fueled market analysis. When I got the offer letter, I cried. My parents cried. My mom called it a miracle. My dad just clapped my back and said, "Make 'em see your worth, son." So I moved into a small 1-bedroom near the French Broad River. Rented. Nothing fancy. Every morning, I jogged past million-dollar homes that looked like they'd been plucked straight out of Architectural Digest. And every night, I stayed late at the office, trying to prove I belonged. Then I met her, Charlotte Langford, the boss's daughter. You ever watch those old movies where the rich girl is out of your league, but somehow she notices you? It wasn't like that. It was a Thursday. I remember because I hadn't shaved, and my collar was slightly wrinkled. We were in a product development meeting. Topic: how to use AI to predict what kind of sofa people would buy based on their personality. I presented a segment on data trends. Nothing fancy, just clean work. Charlotte, blonde hair, blazer too sharp for a design role, smile that felt real, turned to me and said, "That was brilliant." Later, she found me in the hallway. "Coffee?" she asked. "Now." She nodded. "You earned it." We talked for hours. About product design, about books, about how she hated people assuming she was shallow just because her last name bought yachts. I told her about my hometown in Iowa, about my mom, the elementary school teacher, and my dad, a machine shop engineer who worked through a slipped disc. She listened, like really listened. We started dating in secret, not because it was wrong, but because we both knew what would happen if it got out. And of course, it did get out. You know that moment when the office elevator gets too quiet, when people stop talking the moment you walk in. Hunter, the guy from strategy. Yeah, him. Word is he's dating Charlotte Langford. The Charlotte. Gold digger, gotta be. I thought I could ignore it, just put my head down and keep working. I proposed an expansion into the European market that boosted revenue by 15% in 1 quarter. My numbers were clean. My slides flawless. I had proof. I had receipts. And yet, When promotion season came, nothing. I asked my manager why. He smiled. You're doing well, Hunter. But the Langfords are cautious. They don't want appearances of favoritism. I laughed. I actually laughed. So I'm too close to be promoted. He shrugged. That's the way it works sometimes. No. That's the way it works when you're not one of them. The first Langford family dinner I was invited to felt like walking into a lion's den. Massive mansion on the edge of the forest. Spotless hedges. Driveway longer than my hometown's main street. Charlotte squeezed my hand so tight, I thought she was nervous too. They'll come around, she whispered. Mr. Benedict Langford met me at the door. Silver hair, tailored navy suit, eyes like frostbite. Hunter, he said, offering a hand like it was charity. Hope you didn't get lost. They all laughed. At dinner, they talked about skiing in Switzerland, about $3 million stock trades. I tried to chime in once about modular home markets and Mrs. Eleanor Langford, Charlotte's mother, cut me off with a smile so sweet it burned. Oh, you must know all about smart sofas, don't you, Hunter? Tell me, do you own one? Laughter again. This time thinner, meaner. My throat tightened. I swallowed a bite of foie gras that tasted like shame. Later that night, I sat in my car, staring at my reflection in the windshield, wondering what the hell I was doing. I don't belong here, I whispered. But Charlotte, she held me together, told me about her lonely childhood, her parents' empty hugs, how her grandmother in Switzerland was the only person who saw her. She'd like you, she said. Grandma Amelia sees people. I wanted to believe her, but the whispers at work kept growing. He's just playing the long game. He's after her inheritance. They weren't just insults anymore. They were character assassinations. I started writing emails to myself at night, never sent, just to cope. One of them still haunts me. If this all ends tomorrow, at least I didn't sell my soul to get here. But I was tired. So tired. Then came the invitation. The Langford family BBQ. A high society spectacle that made Met Gala look like a potluck. And Charlotte's grandmother, Amelia Langford, was flying in from Switzerland. This is our turning point. Charlotte said, she'll back us. I nodded, smiled. But inside, I was drowning. And that's when it started raining. Not just outside, but inside my head. And I hadn't even seen her yet, the old woman by the road, the one who would change everything. But the invitation didn't come by email or phone call, no. The Langfords were too old money for that. It came as a thick cream envelope, delivered to my apartment by a uniformed courier. The paper was embossed, heavy in my hands, stamped with the golden lion of the Langford family crest. I remember the way it shimmered under my kitchen light, like it was mocking me. Inside gold lettering, formal phrasing, polite poison. We cordially invite Mr. Hunter Briggs to attend the Langford family summer barbecue at 3:00 p.m. sharp, Langford Estate, July 15th. At the bottom, in Charlotte's handwriting, this is it. I love you. Please come. I sat down on the couch, the card trembling in my hands. Not from fear yet, from weight. From the knowledge that this invitation wasn't about celebration. It was a test. The Langford family BBQ wasn't your typical backyard burgers and beers affair. Charlotte had described it to me months ago. Hundreds of guests from across the country. Michelin star chefs, senators, tech moguls, fashion editors, and this year, the matriarch herself, Amelia Langford, was returning from Switzerland to attend. It wasn't just a party, it was a statement. And I mud-blooded. Middle class, son of a factory engineer, was about to walk straight into it. I started preparing like a man going to war. First, I went downtown and rented a high-end suit. Silver gray Italian wool, tailored just enough to flatter me, but not enough to hide my nerves. The price tag made me flinch, half my paycheck gone in one swipe. "You'll look like a true gentleman," the saleswoman said. Straightening the lapel, I forced a smile. Let's hope they see it that way. Next, I borrowed a watch from my buddy Jonah. Leather band, brushed steel. Just enough status to say I belonged, without screaming try hard. I polished my shoes till they shined. Practiced greetings in the mirror. "Mr. Benedict, thank you for having me. Mrs. Eleanor, it's a pleasure. Amelia Langford, it's an honor." I even wrote an email to myself the night before. I never sent it, just needed to get it out. If they destroy me tomorrow, I want to remember I went in with my dignity. July 15th came with cloud-heavy skies and sticky southern heat. I showered, shaved, and dressed with care, checking myself 3 times in the mirror. Charlotte had texted early that morning. "You've got this. Grandma's going to love you." She didn't know how badly I needed those words. I left early 2:00 p.m. sharp. Wanted to be there with time to spare. Didn't want to be the guy who showed up late to the most important event of his life. The winding drive through the suburbs was quiet. Trees heavy with humidity. Radio playing softly one of our favorite songs from our first date. I remember smiling. Just for a second. Just before everything unraveled. That's when I saw her. An old woman, standing on the side of the road. Frail. Confused. Silver hair pulled back in a bun. Small handbag dangling from one hand, the other raised in a weak wave. I slowed, unsure. She looked out of place, lost, almost translucent in the midsummer haze. I rolled down the window. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Her voice trembled. I don't remember the way home. I think I'm lost." I looked at the clock, 2:12 p.m. Plenty of time. And yet, I hesitated. This was the kind of situation my dad always talked about. Character is who you are when no one's watching. Still, I had a mansion to get to, a billionaire to impress, a suit that cost half my rent. But her eyes, they were cloudy, searching. I took a breath. "I'll help you," I said. She didn't remember her name, only that she lived near a rose garden, that her daughter once planted white roses in the front yard. So we walked, me in my pristine suit, holding the elbow of a woman who kept calling me James and asking about the weather in Vermont. I knocked on doors, asked neighbors, called the non-emergency line. Nothing matched. And then it started raining. Not a storm, just a slow, soft summer drizzle. The kind that sneaks up on you and soaks everything before you notice. I took off my coat and held it above her shoulders. Her skin was ice cold. Mine, sweating beneath wool and nerves. My shoes squelched in the muddy sidewalk. My tie stuck to my neck, and still, she gripped my arm like I was her last lifeline. "You're very kind," she said. "Most people just drive by." I smiled, though inside I was unraveling. I'm going to be late. I'm going to show up looking like a wreck. They're going to destroy me. But I didn't stop. Finally, after nearly 40 minutes, she froze in front of a small white house with rose bushes spilling over the gate. "This is it," she whispered. "This is my home." She turned to me, gripping my hand. "God will bless you, young man. You saved me." I ran back to my car like my life depended on it. Because it did. The clock read 3:10 p.m. Rain still falling. Hair dripping. Suit wrinkled. Shoes caked in dirt. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror and saw a ghost. Not a guest. Not a gentleman. Just a guy in a ruined suit, trembling behind the wheel of a 6-year-old sedan, about to walk into a lion's den 40 minutes late. As I approached the Langford estate, I saw the gate. Tall, black, iron, regal, golden lion glinting in the rain. I pulled up, heart pounding, buzzed the intercom. A guard peered through the small window. His eyes scanned me like I was a broken thing. Name: Hunter Briggs. Pause. He checked a list, frowned. You're late. I had an emergency. I said, voice thin, please, just call inside. He did. A minute passed, then another. Finally, the gate creaked open. You can go in, he muttered. Don't cause a scene. I drove up the gravel path, white tents visible through the mist. People in suits and silk dresses moved like shadows under twinkling chandeliers. Jazz music floated in the air. And I looked like I had crawled out of a storm drain. But I got out, straightened my back, walked toward the party with soaked shoes squishing against the manicured stone. And as I stepped into view, everything stopped. Laughter, conversations, music. Hundreds of eyes turned, and I froze like a bug under a magnifying glass. Someone whispered, "Who the hell is that?" Another voice, "Is that the boyfriend?" Then came his voice, "Mr. Benedict Langford." Sharp, loud, echoing through the speakers. "Hunter Briggs," he boomed. "You're late, and you look like a disgrace." But before I could speak, before I could explain what happened, a loud beep echoed from the AV system. A projector screen flickered to life. And then, my heart nearly stopped. Because what played next was me in full detail helping that old woman down the street. From above, the screen flickered to life like a lightning strike in the middle of that silent, judgmental garden. And there I was, my own face, pale and tired, hair dripping wet, voice trembling. "Don't worry, ma'am. I'll help you find your way." The footage was clear, crystal clear, overhead angles, slow pans, tight shots on the old woman's hands clutching mine. Someone had filmed the whole thing. Not with a phone, not from across the street. This was planned, professional. The guests, frozen a moment ago, now murmured in growing waves. "Oh my God, is that today? That's him, that's Hunter." I stood there, completely still, my chest rising and falling like I'd just run a marathon. My soaked clothes clung to me, the cold settling into my bones, but the heat rising from my face. Unbearable. The footage kept rolling, me shielding her from the rain. My coat wrapped around her shoulders. Her voice, "You're so kind. No one stops anymore." Then her hand gripping mine. The white roses. The moment she recognized her house. And finally, me running back to my car like a man trying to outrun the storm. A beat of silence followed the end. And then, pandemonium. Gasps. Murmurs. "You helped her? Wait. Was that his reason for being late? Who even filmed this?" Charlotte rushed to my side, eyes wide with shock and something else awe. "Hunter," she whispered, gripping my hand. "That woman, you don't know who she is?" I shook my head. Charlotte turned slowly, eyes scanning the crowd. Then she whispered something I'll never forget. That was my grandmother. My knees nearly gave out. The old woman with the cloudy eyes, the one wandering the street. The one I thought had Alzheimer's and no name was Amelia Langford, the VIP, the legend. The woman Charlotte had spoken of for months, the one who managed a fortune in Switzerland, who saw through masks, who supposedly carried the real power in the Langford dynasty. I couldn't breathe. I barely heard the commotion around me. Footsteps echoed on the marble patio. And from the direction of the main tent emerged a figure I barely recognized. She wasn't confused now. She wasn't frail. Amelia Langford walked like she owned the ground beneath her feet. Hair perfectly styled, a light blue dress, pearl necklace glowing beneath the garden lights, eyes sharp, intelligent, amused, and smiling. She approached slowly, as if the entire party parted for her because they did. Mr. Benedict Langford, who had moments earlier tried to humiliate me publicly, stood frozen in place, face pale, lips twitching. Mrs. Eleanor stood next to him, expression unreadable, but her hand clutched her champagne flute a little too tight. Amelia took the mic from the stunned event coordinator. Didn't need any notes. Her voice strong, clear, elegant, cut through the air like a conductor's baton. "This young man," she said, pointing toward me, helped me without knowing who I was. He had every reason to say no. He had somewhere to be. He was dressed in his finest, on his way to prove himself to a family who doubted him. She paused. A hush swept through the crowd. But instead, he saw a confused, elderly woman in need, and he chose kindness. A beat. That is what real character looks like. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. But for the first time, I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't embarrassed. I was seen, truly seen. Charlotte pressed her forehead against my shoulder. Her voice shook as she whispered, "I told you. She sees people." Benedict Langford stepped forward, clearing his throat. But his usual commanding tone was cracked, now shaky. Brittle. "Mother, why didn't you tell us? Why set up a test like that?" Mrs. Eleanor chimed in, her tone more brittle than silk. "You pretended to be lost. Hired a camera crew. We were in the dark." Amelia turned to them, and her expression changed. Softened, but not weak. She looked at them like a teacher disappointed in her brightest students, because I wanted to see him for myself. Charlotte told me everything. The rumors, the blocks, the way he was treated. She took a step closer to them. "I knew if I just met him over dinner, I'd see the version of him you wanted me to see. But I needed to see the real Hunter." The silence afterward felt heavier than any insult. And then she turned to me again. "Hunter," she said gently, "thank you for helping a woman you didn't recognize, for choosing humanity over reputation. That's the kind of man I want beside my granddaughter." I was still speechless, soaked, shaking. But something inside me, something deep, solid, shifted. For the first time in months, I felt steady. Later, as the music resumed and the guests floated back to their tables, I found myself sitting beside Amelia and Charlotte under one of the side tents. Candles flickered on the white linen tablecloth. My plate sat untouched. "Did you plan all of that yourself?" I finally asked Amelia. She sipped her wine, every detail. "And the camera?" She smiled. "Let's just say Switzerland has taught me to appreciate documentation." Charlotte laughed softly, her fingers laced with mine. "I told you Grandma doesn't play." I turned to Amelia again, my voice lower. "I wrote an email to myself the night before this party. I said, just in case it went badly, She leaned forward. What did it say? I swallowed. That if they destroyed me, I'd still walk away with my dignity. Amelia's gaze softened. You didn't walk away. Hunter, you walked through. But before I could respond, I noticed something. Across the patio, Mr. Benedict Langford was standing alone by the fountain, talking on his phone. His face was unreadable, but it wasn't pride, or joy, or approval. It was something colder, and as I watched him, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Charlotte leaned toward me, voice barely above a whisper. He's not done yet. And I knew she was right, because when you shake the foundation of power, it always shakes back. The days after the barbecue felt like a dream I wasn't ready to wake up from. The footage went viral inside the company. Someone had shared a short clip me helping the lost old woman in a ruined suit, and within hours, it had spread across Langford International's internal Slack channels. Even the janitor from the 3rd floor walked by my desk, grinning. You've got guts, man. My email flooded with messages from people who'd never said more than 2 words to me before. But the message I was waiting for, it came 3 days later. Subject line: promotion consideration, executive review meeting. My chest tightened. I stared at the screen like it might vanish. This wasn't a formality. It was the very same position that had been gate-kept from me for months, head of global marketing. I walked into the meeting like a man crossing a frozen lake, light-footed, cautious, not trusting the calm under the surface. There were 5 people in the room, but only one that mattered. Mr. Benedict Langford. He sat at the end of the long oak table, suit perfect, fingers steepled, eyes unreadable. Charlotte had warned me the night before. He won't make it easy. And she was right. The review went long, too long. They asked about market strategy, about vision, about expansion plans into Africa and Southeast Asia. I had answers. I had charts. I had case studies, numbers, proof. But when Benedict finally spoke, it wasn't about numbers. It's one thing to impress at a barbecue, he said coolly. It's another to carry a global brand. The air in the room turned icy. I kept my hands steady, my face calm, but inside, I burned. He still didn't see me, or rather he refused to. But that night, after I left the meeting, Charlotte texted me a single sentence. Grandma had a talk with him. And then, 4 days later, it happened. I was called back in. Same table, same suit, same man. But this time, he stood up, extended his hand. Congratulations. Mr. Briggs, he said. You're the new head of marketing. The title didn't feel real at first, but the view from the new corner office did. It overlooked the French Broad River, sunlight rippling across the windows like it was finally smiling on me. Colleagues who once whispered now shook my hand in public. Charlotte brought me lunch that first week, and everyone watched as she kissed my cheek and said, "Told you he'd make it." I felt like I had made it, almost, but deep down, I knew something wasn't sitting right. Because Benedict hadn't forgiven me. He had adjusted to me. And when powerful men adjust, they don't do it without a cost. 2 months into my new role, I started noticing little things. Meetings I wasn't invited to, but should have been. Memos that went around me. Requests for senior approval that somehow bypassed my office. And then came the email from legal. Hey, Hunter, just flagging your expense card shows 3 overseas hotel bookings from last quarter. Want to clarify those? I blinked. I hadn't traveled at all. My passport hadn't even left the drawer. I checked the log. 3 transactions. Singapore, Zurich, Milan. All booked in my name. I felt a cold sweat slide down my back. I reported it immediately. Filed a fraud claim. Talked to aita. Talked to finance. Everyone acted shocked, but no one moved fast. And suddenly, people started whispering again. He's misusing funds. Maybe the promotion was rushed. Charlotte noticed it too. She cornered me one night after dinner. Concern etched on her face. They're setting you up. The next morning, I came in earlier than anyone, and found an envelope taped to my office door. No name, no stamp. Inside was a single printed email, a forward chain, hidden metadata. It traced the fake hotel charges back to one person, Benedict's assistant, the same woman who had once accidentally omitted my name from an investor call. I stared at the paper, breath shallow. This wasn't a glitch. It was a trap. I spent the next 2 days gathering everything I could. Chat logs, card history, time-stamped security footage from the IT server room where someone had accessed my login at 2:14 a.m. on a Sunday. All of it, packed into a flash drive. I named the folder Not a Coincidence. Then, I booked a meeting with only 2 people, Amelia Langford and Charlotte. When I walked into the study of the Langford estate that Sunday morning, Amelia was already seated by the fireplace, a cup of tea in hand. Charlotte stood by the window, arms crossed, furious. I told her everything. She said before I could even open my mouth. Amelia motioned me to sit. Tell me what you know, Hunter. I handed her the flash drive, and as she scrolled through the contents, her face didn't change. Not once. But her grip on the mouse tightened. Jaw clenched. When she reached the final file screenshots of Benedict's assistant logging into the back-end system, she finally spoke. I always thought my son was proud. She said softly, "Turns out he's just afraid." We sat in silence for a long while. Then Amelia looked at me, eyes steely. "We're going to handle this the Langford way." I blinked. "Which is?" She smiled. "Public, controlled, and devastating." Charlotte took my hand as we stood to leave. "You sure about this?" I asked her. She nodded. "They crossed the line. Hunter, it's our turn now." And as we stepped out into the cold morning air, I knew. They'd tried to bury me with rumors, sabotage, and silence. But now, I had something stronger. The truth. The Monday after our secret meeting with Amelia Langford, I walked into the office like a man carrying a lit match in a room full of gasoline. On the surface, calm, professional. I wore my sharpest navy suit, my favorite leather watch polished, precise. But inside, every cell in my body buzzed with electricity. Because today wasn't just another workday. It was reckoning day. The trap they set for me, quiet, strategic, dignified sabotage, was about to backfire in front of everyone who mattered. And I didn't have to lift a finger. At exactly 10:15 a.m., the entire executive team was called to an emergency corporate ethics briefing on the 27th floor. Unusual, extremely. The invite came from the office of the chairwoman. Yes, Amelia Langford herself. The moment I stepped off the elevator, I knew something was different. Security was tighter. There were 2 legal reps standing near the doors. A camera crew from internal communications had been summoned for record-keeping. And Benedict Langford, Mr. Untouchable, was already there. Stiff in his seat, jaw tight. He barely glanced at me. He didn't have to. He knew. The trap had turned. Amelia entered 5 minutes later. Elegant in a charcoal gray suit, pearls at her neck, folder in hand. She didn't sit, just stood at the head of the table and opened the meeting with the smooth authority of someone used to ruling empires and family alike. "We're here," she said. to address a matter of grave ethical concern that touches not just one of our executives, but the integrity of Langford International as a whole. Every head snapped toward her, then toward Benedict. I stayed silent. My hands were steady, my breath even. But inside, I was replaying every humiliation, every sideways glance, every whispered gold digger and social climber. Amelia continued. Last quarter, a series of fraudulent expense charges were submitted under the credentials of our head of marketing, Mr. Hunter Briggs. A low murmur rolled across the room. She raised her hand. Silence fell again. After internal investigation, including digital forensics and security footage, it is now confirmed that those charges were not authorized by Mr. Briggs. She turned to Benedict's assistant, who had been invited but hadn't spoken a word, and calmly laid down a printed stack of emails, security logs, and timestamps. You accessed the system at 2:14 a.m. from an IP address registered at Mr. Langford's private office. Gasps. The assistant's face went pale. Benedict opened his mouth, but Amelia raised one perfectly manicured finger. I'm not accusing you, she said evenly. The evidence is, it was chaos after that. Benedict tried to recover, claimed it was rogue action, that he'd never authorized such behavior, that he was shocked and saddened. But Amelia didn't blink. She nodded slowly. I believe you're saddened, she said, but shocked, no. Then she handed a sealed envelope to legal. As of this moment, Benedict Langford will be taking an indefinite leave of absence from daily operations. Effective immediately. The room spun. People were too stunned to speak. Benedict, Mr. Power Suit, just sat there, still, defeated. And yet, in that moment, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free, not because he'd been removed, but because the whispers, the games, the sabotage they were over. That afternoon, I went back to my office and opened the email I had written months ago, the one I never sent. The draft was still there, titled, If This All Falls Apart. I deleted it, typed a new one. Subject, We Rise Differently. Dad, you once said dignity is the only thing a man can carry with him when the world shuts its doors. I carried mine through the storm, and now it's holding the doors wide open. Love, Hunter. But the real surprise, it came 2 days later. I was invited back to the Langford estate, not for a scolding, not for a lecture, but for dinner. A real dinner. No cold jokes, no raised eyebrows, no silverware clicking like landmines. Just family. Charlotte and I sat across from Amelia as she poured wine and asked about our long-term plans. And then, with a quiet smile, she leaned in. I want to invest in the two of you, not just in your careers, but in your mission. I blinked. Mission. Charlotte smiled. We've been talking. And that's when she told me, after the whole ordeal, after everything we'd survived, Charlotte had suggested something I never would have imagined. A charity foundation, dedicated to helping elderly people, especially those with Alzheimer's, live safer. More connected lives. It would start small, smart furniture installations, alert systems, support groups, but it would grow, and it would be named after the person who changed my life. With one decision, the Amelia Foundation, for the first time in months, I felt emotion rise in my throat that wasn't panic or pain. It was purpose. I want in, I said, all the way. And Amelia, she nodded, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. Good, she said. Because we're going to change lives. If exposing Benedict Langford was a battle, planning our wedding was the war. I know that sounds dramatic, but you have to understand this wasn't just a wedding. It was a Langford wedding, A public event. A statement. A reckoning. And for a guy who grew up in Iowa eating pulled pork sandwiches off paper plates in the backyard, being asked to plan a 300-person luxury wedding in a vineyard surrounded by billionaires, yeah, I was out of my depth. But I wasn't alone. Charlotte was a force. From the moment we announced the date early summer in Asheville, she took charge with this steady fire in her eyes. "We're doing this our way," she said. "No curated influencer show. No approval committee. Just us." I believed her. Right up until her mother got involved. Mrs. Eleanor Langford called a planning breakfast 2 weeks into the process. I was told it was casual. Bagels and florals. No pressure. I showed up in a polo and jeans. She showed up with a wedding planner from Paris, 3 swatch books, and a PowerPoint presentation titled A Legacy Ceremony. Slide 1, A Langford family wedding is not a backyard affair. She didn't say my name, but her eyes made sure I felt it. Charlotte sat beside me, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. I could see the war inside her between the daughter trying to keep peace and the woman determined to protect her partner. When Eleanor proposed a guest list of 600, including distant European royalty, I laughed under my breath. She looked at me like I'd just insulted Beethoven. That night, Charlotte and I sat on the balcony of my apartment, overlooking the French Broad River, her head on my shoulder. "I love her," she said quietly. "But sometimes, I forget if she sees me or just my last name." I held her tighter. "You're not your family," I whispered, "but you are mine." The wedding stress only grew. 1 week, the caterer dropped out because a Langford rival bought the venue next door and demanded exclusivity. Another week, the custom rings Charlotte designed were delayed in customs because the craftsman in Italy spelled Briggs as bricks. But through it all, we clung to the why. Not the optics, not the floral arrangements. Us, every night. I opened a new email draft, a letter to myself. Sometimes I titled them Hunter July 2023. Other times, just read this if you forget. I saved one that simply said, "Don't confuse their silence with your worth. You didn't come this far to lose yourself." The big day came fast. It was June. Asheville was lush and green, the mountains humming with birdsong and distant thunder. The Langford vineyard estate had been transformed. White tents billowed under the soft breeze, strings of lights tangled above banquet tables. And Charlotte's favorite flowers, white garden roses, lined the aisle like a living painting. Guests arrived in luxury SUVs and vintage Rolls-Royces. Some wore sunglasses worth more than my old Honda. But when I stood in front of that arch, heart thudding like a drum, and saw Charlotte walking toward me in that long, simple silk dress, all of it, the pressure, the judgment, the years of being doubted, just faded. She was all I saw, all I chose. Amelia Langford officiated. Yes, that Amelia. Standing there with a handwritten vow book, looking like royalty and warmth had joined forces. She opened the ceremony with words that stopped time. This love was not handed to them. It was fought for, tested, judged, survived. And that is why it deserves to be honored not as tradition, but as revolution. We exchanged vows. Mine were short, but every word was truth. You never asked me to be anything other than myself, so I promised to never let the world twist me back into someone I'm not. We kissed, and the entire vineyard erupted. Applause, laughter. Someone popped a champagne bottle too early and scared a child. I think even Eleanor smiled, though it looked like it hurt. The reception blurred in the best way. Toasts, dances, photos under twilight skies. My parents cried during our first dance. They'd flown in from Iowa, wearing their best. Dad in the same suit he wore to my college graduation. Mom with a corsage Charlotte had picked just for her. At one point, my mom whispered to me, "We may not have their money, but we've got their respect now." It hit me like a wave, because it was true. Even Benedict, who had been silent the entire night, approached me near the end. He didn't apologize, but he offered his hand. "Hunter," he said, "you made it." I looked him in the eye. "No, sir," I replied. "We made it." We left that night in a car filled with flowers, cake, and leftover wine. The stars above the Appalachian Mountains shimmered like they were celebrating too. Our honeymoon began the next morning. 3 weeks across Europe, Paris, Rome, Lake Geneva. We walked through cobblestone streets, kissed under cathedrals, laughed until we cried over bad train schedules. But the most important moment, it happened in Switzerland. Amelia had invited us to her home near Lake Geneva, a quiet, historic villa overlooking vineyards and the blue water. Over dinner, she made a toast. "To legacy," she said. "Not the kind that's inherited, but the kind you build." Then she handed us a thick envelope. Inside the deed to a small beachfront villa in Carolina. "Your wedding gift," she smiled. "And your headquarters." We were stunned, but she wasn't finished. "I'm funding the first 3 years of the Amelia Foundation," she said. "Let's change some lives." Charlotte's eyes welled with tears. I reached across the table and held her hand. This was no longer about surviving. It was about building. 3 days later, we returned to the States and started the foundation immediately. Set up a modest office in downtown Asheville. Paperwork, licensing, grant applications. I gave my first interview on local TV. Nervous, sweaty palms, but proud. We launched a pilot program, Smart Furniture, for low-income seniors, especially those with memory conditions. Charlotte designed the catalog herself, and every time a beneficiary cried during install day, we cried too. The whispers gone, the judgment outdated, the shame buried. But one thing still kept me up at night. A letter from Benedict, delivered by courier one early morning. I opened it alone. Inside a single line. "Power doesn't forgive, it adapts." And below it, a legal notice. A motion to challenge Amelia's transfer of family shares. I stared at the letter for a long time. Not the legal jargon, my lawyer could decode that. But the one handwritten line at the top. "Power doesn't forgive, it adapts." Benedict Langford might have stepped down from the boardroom, but he hadn't stepped down from the game. And now he was back. With lawyers, the motion wasn't subtle. Filed in a private court in Delaware where many of the Langford assets were registered. It challenged Amelia's authority to transfer family shares, especially to non-blood successors. His angle was clear. I wasn't a Langford, and neither was Charlotte anymore. Not in the way he recognized. We weren't preserving the legacy. We were redefining it, and that made us dangerous. When I broke the news to Charlotte, she didn't flinch. She read the letter, then calmly walked into our home office, pulled out a file labeled Contingencies, and said, "Let's fight back." She had a plan. Because Charlotte had been raised in that world, she knew how it worked. And while Benedict played power with paper and prestige, Charlotte played it with people and principles. "Let's put this in the sunlight," she said. "Let the world see what this really is." We scheduled a press conference, not flashy, not defensive, just honest. It was held in the community center we had helped renovate through the Amelia Foundation, the same place where we'd hosted Alzheimer's awareness events and taught seniors how to use the emergency features in their smart furniture. Local reporters came, then regional ones, then national. We didn't go on the attack. We told a story. Charlotte took the mic first. She didn't read from a script. She didn't speak like a corporate heir. She spoke like a daughter. I love my father. She began, voice steady. But I love the truth more. She spoke about what we'd built, but how we started the foundation, not to steal a legacy, but to give one. I followed her with a few words. Short, calm, purposeful. I'm not here to replace anyone. I said, I'm just here to prove that character matters more than bloodlines. Then, we played the original drone footage. Yes, that footage. Me, in a soaked suit, helping a woman I didn't know who turned out to be the most powerful person in the family. That moment, when the crowd saw her again, when they saw how it all began, something changed. They didn't see a lawsuit anymore. They saw a pattern, and it worked. The public rallied behind us. More donations came into the foundation in 1 week than the previous 3 months combined. Seniors showed up at the office with casseroles and handwritten cards. Even former Langford employees, some quietly pushed out by Benedict over the years, began reaching out to us privately. My mother was one of the first people to benefit from your furniture program. One wrote, "Tell me how I can help." Still, the legal fight dragged on. But Amelia, she didn't back down either. She took the stand herself during the final hearing. At 83, wearing the same pearl necklace she'd worn the night of the barbecue, I built this legacy. She told the judge, her voice firm. And I get to decide who carries it forward. Her testimony was short but devastating. She spoke of betrayal, of compassion, of watching her son try to twist the very values the company was built on: dignity, innovation, trust. Then she turned to me, sitting quietly in the back row, and said, "Hunter Briggs is my family, not by blood, but by choice. And choice is what builds true legacy." The ruling came 3 weeks later. The motion was denied, unanimously. Benedict's challenge was rejected as meritless and inconsistent with the values and corporate governance of Langford International. He wouldn't be returning to the company, and as quietly as he tried to take everything back, he vanished. In the months that followed, the Amelia Foundation grew faster than we could have dreamed. We partnered with 2 national healthcare providers, launched our own AI-assisted monitoring system for high-risk seniors. Charlotte was invited to speak at TED. And me, I kept writing those emails to myself. But now, I titled them differently. You're here. You built this. Stay kind. Stay sharp. 1 year after the barbecue, we hosted a celebration back at the Langford estate. Not to gloat, to honor. Amelia was there, seated in her favorite chair under the oak trees, wearing sunglasses and smiling like the matriarch she always was. My parents flew in again. My dad wore a new suit this time. My mom baked pies for the volunteers. There were no cold stares, no judgment, just warmth. That night, after everyone had gone home and the lights were being packed away, I found myself standing alone in the vineyard, holding the exact same suit jacket I'd worn on the day everything changed. Still stained, still wrinkled, but now a symbol. Charlotte walked up behind me, barefoot on the grass, and rested her head on my shoulder. "You still have that." "I never cleaned it," I said quietly. "Why?" I smiled. "Because it reminds me where I started and what it took to get here. So if you're still watching, here's the truth I learned. Being underestimated is painful, but being true to yourself when the world tries to reshape you, that's power." They called me a gold digger, a nobody, a background character in their dynasty, but kindness wrote me into their story, and truth gave me the pen. If this story moved you even a little, drop a comment. Share your own story, or just tell me you're still here. And don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes, the ones the world tries hardest to erase are the ones who end up rewriting everything.